And we are live. How's it going, Mets fans? Whoever you're a fan of, it's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with our latest edition of Mets Free Agent Frenzy live here during the winter meetings. However, it's been anything but a free agent frenzy. If it is, it's more so on the lower scale of players, and these winter meetings have been underwhelming to say the least. Thank you, Shohei Ohtani, for quite literally log jamming everything for the most part. And I understand that Ohtani, of course, is this tremendous talent, and I'm not going to take that away from him. But as a content creator and as a sports fan, man, oh man, I just want to see the floodgates open, and they have yet to do so, which automatically leads Mets fans to believing, oh my goodness, this is Will Ponce 2.0. We're going to be rebuilding in 2024. We're going to have 100 losses. We're not going to do anything. Screw Yamamoto, screw Monty, screw Erod, screw all these players. We're getting nobody. They have no interest, all these things. I'm going to try to calm the nerves a little bit, bring you guys back to reality. I know that's hard to do for some of you, but I'm going to do my best, as there's a lot of key updates to get into tonight as we're breaking down all the latest in Mets land, not only on the MLB lottery, which was an absolute joke that I'll get into shortly, Eric Fedde going to the White Sox and why that isn't necessarily a bad thing, getting into the latest pitching targets, including Lucas Giolito, who I recently just did a video on a couple hours ago. Make sure to check it out in case you haven't already after you watch this live show, and so many other things here in Mets land, along with some recent comments today from David Stearns, Mets Pobo himself. And then around 20 minutes or so from now, around 8 p.m. Eastern, Draftneck Mark, co-host of the Mets Stuff podcast with James Shiano, Mark Luino will be joining me to share his thoughts and opinions on all things Mets that are happening this offseason. But before I advance further in the show, I want to give a massive shout out to every single one of you guys for chiming in. Thank you for your patience, for the people in the live show too, as your boy was typically late as always. But again, really happy to have you all in here. Yoshima, Scott, Juan, Kish, Dave, all you guys, all you beauties, Pat Benson, Mike, A Memory, Robert, the list goes on and on, Frank, Michael Stroh, another great member, everybody, AB, Mr. Chicken, you name it. Happy to have all you beauties in here. And again, we have a lot to get into, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, while there's nothing that I can officially say, yes, there are things going on in Mets land that are not in the public eye, and there's reason for them. But there is one specific thing in particular where, should it happen, I would not be opposed to it pretty much whatsoever. I would have very little reservations with it. And I can't expand on it too much for obvious reasons, as you guys know, but I'm not the type of person to go out of my way and make the remarks I'm making right now without knowing that clearly that this is real. And whether the Mets land this player or not, again, is yet to be seen, because they are not the only people in the market for said player. However, they are involved, and there are things going on behind the scenes. That's why David Stearns looked like today in his interview that the guy hasn't had sleep, because he hasn't. He's working tirelessly. The Mets are destined to make a lot of moves. Whether they make plenty in winter meetings or not really is yet to be seen. But rest assured, they have a lot of roster spots that they need to fill out, a lot of key decisions that they have to make, and I assure you, this Mets team is trying to do their best by putting their best foot forward and not only acquiring the top guys that we know, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Jordan Montgomery, etc., but also maybe some other names that you haven't thought about too much, which goes in hand with what I was initially referring to. So again, know that the Mets certainly have things cooking. No, it's not Shohei. I'm telling you right now, it's not Shohei. I'm telling you that right now. Don't even twist it. If the Mets end up landing Shohei or being the mystery team, I would be as shocked as you are, because I do not foresee that happening. I already view Shohei as an afterthought, truly. The only relevant thing about Shohei right now is that he's holding up the market, and I want to know when he's landing and where. Hog, I love you too. Everyone, make sure to subscribe to Hogwatch, the #1 Padres YouTuber on the planet. Just unrolled out an awesome schedule that he's going to have all off-season long, where it's not only him, but other awesome Padres content creators sharing their weekly ideas and opinions on all things San Diego all off-season long. Shout out to you, Hog, for chiming in. A great friend of mine and a phenomenal YouTuber in his own right. But we got played again. Billy McKinney. Yes, you said it right there. Randy, no. Again, like I said, guys, even if I wanted to, I'm not able to really specify more than that, because by doing so, I lose the connects that I currently have. And that would be a silly thing on my end, because there's one upside by having connects in the industry from time to time. It just helps give me a slight advantage when it comes to prepping for certain things. So that's all I can really leave you with. Just know that the Mets are certainly working on things, and this was an interesting one. This is not a player or players that I was expecting. Let me put it that way. But I'm not opposed to it. Just similar in the sense of who expected the Mets to be a finalist for Eric Fedde last night, right? No one did. I'm not saying that it's the same caliber player. I'm not saying that whatsoever. Just saying no one expected the Mets to really be in on Eric Fedde. We joked about it, and then they ended up being a finalist, and now today he signs with the White Sox on that 2-year, $15 million deal. So from there, can you tell us once it happened? Of course I'll tell you. Yeah, absolutely. Let me put it this way. If the Mets end up landing said player, there's no doubt in my mind that I'll probably be the first right away to go live about it because I'll already be prepared for it. So that's how you'll know. But again, there's a great chance that the Mets do not get said player either because they aren't the only team involved in the market for him. It's just an interesting one, and that's where I will leave it for the fifth and final time. But see all you beauties in here. We're going to have Draft Neck Mark in 15 minutes. So I want to share off the riff some thoughts going on with the Mets right now. Of course, if you guys didn't check out last night's live show, it's still very relevant. Highly implore you all to do so. Myself, Jolly Olive, a phenomenal baseball YouTuber, formerly co-host of the Shea Station podcast with Jerry Blevins. And then you also had Pat Ragazzo, who does a fantastic job on the beat for the Mets, sharing his insights, both of them in Nashville during these winter meetings. So make sure to check out that live show from yesterday in case you haven't already, as well as all the other previous content. Smash that like and subscribe button for your boy. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you all so much in advance. It's 2 a.m. worthy, Oliver? I mean, if it would have happened, of course. I mean, considering I did a video on Eric Fedde past midnight, I think the bar is pretty low as to doing late night content covering the Mets right now. Yeah, I'd say it's a 2 a.m. worthy of reviewing it from that standpoint. Dude, I literally did a late night video on recapping the Severino and Wendell signings. I mean, you either have to be sick or you have to be me, which I guess is also being a sicko to go out your way to make content that late at night for these type of moves. But I digress. Let's start off. Let's all talk about just for a second how much, and pardon my French, a fucking joke the MLB lottery is. The draft lottery. They did a fantastic job by not giving us any effing clue what was going on. It's almost like the MLB's behind the eight ball once again on things. Wow. Comes as a surprise to absolutely nobody. The Mets entering the MLB draft lottery today had two options. It was one, they would win the lottery, meaning that they would be in the top 6, which would be awesome. But if they fell out of the top 6, then they would move down 10 spots because Steve Cohen likes to spend money and the league penalizes you for doing so. Yes, that is a reality. That is the world we live in. God forbid a team tries to go all in. What's even funnier is the fact that Cohen spent so much money the past year, they went all in. And he has to deal with these repercussions when we didn't even make playoffs. Why isn't there a clause or something that allows you to be exempt from this problem if you don't even make playoffs while going all in? We proved that just because you spend money doesn't equate success right away. It's just nonsense. Absolutely ridiculous. Faja, Mama Worm, Slants, Goomba, Vinny, Oliver, Mike Norton, all you beauties, thank you so much for chiming in. It's ridiculous. So the Mets, of course, watching the damn thing. Oh my goodness, the Mets name hasn't been called yet. We're past the picks. We get to 7. It's not the Mets. We get to 6. It's not the Mets. My stupid ass is getting my hopes up thinking, did the Mets really just get a top 5 pick? Just to find out, no, they're already out. They get 19th. So I'm not really that bothered by the Mets getting that 19th pick because I'm very confident what they can do there. The Mets have done really, really well over the past number of years with their draft, but they've struggled with bringing those talents to the big league level if they aren't either partnered with or they struggle with their development, in part because of how the Mets develop said players. However, the hire of Chris Gross that the Mets made this offseason as pretty much the head of amateur scouting now coming over from the Astros is notorious for his draft success over the past half decade at minimum, is notorious for his success in international free agency. He is someone I have the utmost trust in. I'm really excited to see next summer what Chris Gross is going to do in his first year, really being the man at the helm representing the Mets here and building this draft. So the draft pick doesn't bother me as much because I'm confident who the Mets have in their front office, as I am bothered by the process that led the Mets to now dropping to the 19th spot after initially hoping that the Mets would best of luck being the top 6, even though that the odds weren't in their favor, or being 7. It's nonsense. I'm not going to expand on it much more than that. It's ridiculous. MLB extortion, says Faj. I agree. Of course they hate Cohen. God forbid they didn't. Can you read my last comment, Mike? I will try to do exactly that. Bear with me just 1 second. Of course, I'm going to try to get plenty of your comments, questions, and concerns by the end of the live show, guys. And of course, anyone that donates, thank you all so much in advance, especially when we have north of 500 live concur viewers the way we do right now. It gets a little harder to keep up with the chat, so I appreciate everyone and their patience. Don't worry, Wardy, we understand. Thank you so much for that. And that was your last comment, my friend. And no, I'm petitioning for Wardy to go to the winter meetings next year. You and I both. And there's a great chance I'll be at winter meetings next year, even if I don't have credentials, because having credentials, there really isn't too much more than you can do aside from having access to the MLB Rule 5 draft. Oh, yeah. I'm absolutely chomping at the bit for that. I'm not going to say absolutely nobody, because there are baseball fans and creators that enjoy that. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you can still do quite a bit there while not having credentials when it comes to getting interviews with a lot of either execs there, coaches, players, just like-minded people, content creators. So it kind of depends where it's going to be. I would love for it to be in San Diego again. If it goes back to San Diego next winter, your boy's going to do everything he can to be there. I love San Diego. It was so much fun when I was there this summer for the Padres-Mets series with my man Borna at Hogwatch. So we talked about the draft lottery. I'm not going to expand out too much there. Let's talk about everyone's favorite signing that never happened in Eric Fedde. Eric Fedde signs a 2-year, $15 million deal. Knew about that a little bit prior today as well, which was greatly appreciated. So I kind of knew, which is why when I spoke in my video about Giolito, I had that gut feeling, you know, for example, that Fedde wasn't happening because I knew it wasn't happening. And I don't have an issue with this, but I will get into the pros and the cons. Why did the Mets pursue Eric Fedde, and why is he going to the White Sox? Well, there are a couple things that go in hand that led to this decision making. I do want to make sure, however, just real quick, that the signing here is 2 years, $15 million deal, which is $5 million more than what was presumed from Mark Feinsand yesterday. 2-year, $50 million deal. Okay, we're looking at $7.5 million over 2 years, per year, over 2 years for Eric Fedde. Now, why did the Mets not go there? Because the Mets don't view Eric Fedde as a full-time starter for their rotation, more than likely. Nor should they, right? I was saying last night, Fedde and a Trevor Williams swingman, six-man type rotation role makes a lot of sense. I can get behind that plenty. I don't think that's a bad idea. But he goes to the Chicago White Sox. And what do the White Sox have that the Mets don't? They have zero expectations heading into 2024. The team's going to be trashed. They're going to be below pond scum. And I feel for my White Sox fans out there, as the White Sox are my favorite team in the AL. You know, it's frustrating. It absolutely is. I love Luis Robert. I love Eloy Jimenez. I want them all in Queens. But, you know, this organization has been so poorly ran for a number of years thanks to their schmuck owner, one of the few you-know-whats that was against Cohen becoming owner a couple of years ago. So I have no sympathy towards him, but I do for the fan base. Eric Fedde's going to get the chance to be an everyday starter there, every fifth day starter at least there in Chicago. That is not something where the Mets likely had a comfortability to really relay his way and say, hey, if we bring you in, you're 100% going to be at least our number 5. No, that does not seem to be the case whatsoever. So for Fedde's career path, it makes sense for him to go to Chicago knowing he's going to be a full-time starter versus the Mets that, while, yes, you have greater chances to maybe have immediate success, whether that's playoff aspirations or maybe even World Series aspirations by year 2, if not sooner, but you're also sacrificing the type of projection that you're going to have as a player. Fedde has been a starter his entire career, pitched just under 200 innings this past year in the KBO, won MVP for them, won their version of Cy Young. Again, congratulations to Fedde and all those accolades. But he's not a guy that, especially if he's not going to be a starter for you, a lock of a starter, that you should just toss $7.5 million per year over 2 years for. And 2, if you can't guarantee that for him, it makes perfect sense from his perspective why the White Sox are a fit. So to everyone that was crying yesterday saying, oh my goodness gracious, how dare you show interest in Eric Fedde? What are you schmucks? How dare you do this? You know, the Mets are going to do nothing this offseason. Calm yourself just a little bit. I promise you, Mets will make moves. The same way, if you've seen around baseball right now, you can hear a pin drop in those winter meetings. Everyone's fed up. Everyone wants moves because Ohtani is this big behemoth. And speaking of Ohtani for a second, I'm sure I'll expand on this with Mark when he gets in the live show. Shout out to Dave Roberts for potentially having a negative impact on their sweepstakes for Shohei Ohtani, which honestly I don't love because a part of me wants Ohtani to go to LA because it reaffirms their lack of ability to land Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I'm concerned with Yamamoto and the prospect of him going to, say, the Dodgers if Ohtani does not land there, because then they're going to allocate that money plenty elsewhere. They're going to, and Yamamoto is a superb talent that we all love and adore and would love to see for whatever club that we're a fan of. But Dave Roberts, when asked today about Shohei Ohtani, yeah, you know what? Yep, we met with Shohei Ohtani. He spent a solid 4 to 5 seconds thinking in his head, no, you stupid, you know what? Don't do it, don't say it, but you gotta say it, you're excited, say it. Okay, I'm gonna say it. Shortly after, gets a text on his phone. The smile goes to this. And quickly, he parts with Dodgers brass. Sounds like a man who just got in trouble for speaking a little too much on his mind. And now we get Cashman out here talking about Soto. You know, borderline looking like this man's out here talking about Soto in a manner as if he has him already on the club. tampering, hello, something. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's been interesting to see the difference in either managers or GMs and who's been tight-lipped, who hasn't. And that was a hilarious situation to have there with Ohtani. Because Ohtani, there's one thing about these sweepstakes. He's trying to keep everything to the chest to his absolute highest ability. So for Roberts to go out of his way to say that they've already met, while when you look at it face value, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, it was a surprise to other people in the Dodgers organization when they heard this news, including, obviously, Friedman. It's pretty funny. So the Ohtani sweepstakes continue. We will see what happens on that front. Hopefully, once that behemoth of a domino falls, we will see further the other dominoes fall. Like, again, and I think a big factor that Mets fans need to realize is that the Mets have to do a lot of depth moves first because the top dogs that they want are not ready to sign somewhere yet. Yamamoto is not going anywhere until at minimum around mid-December. And it could even drag longer than that. Could be longer. But what we know right now is all Yamamoto's doing is meeting virtually with clubs, as he has done with Aaron Boone, in which Boone has said he's met with him and, had a little smirk on his face. Yes, I get it that the Yanks love Yamamoto, and I know that Yamamoto likes the prospect of playing there in the Bronx, but the Mets love Yamamoto as well. I'm sure they virtually met with him as well. If not, they will soon. And then in the coming days after winter meetings, towards the end of the week, Yamamoto will eventually come back to the States then, and he will meet with clubs further. But I just want to emphasize again, the fact that the Mets haven't done any big splashes shouldn't come as a surprise, because newsflash, look around you. Who's doing big splashes right now? What's available in the market? Every player that the Mets want right now is out there. Are they going to land every player? No, of course not. But they have a great opportunity here to play smart. And again, David Stearns, he's notorious. He's made some key signings from the KBO and overseas in recent years. That went in part with the interest in Fedde. As is the case as the Mets reportedly today, according to Michael Mayer, are one of 9 teams interested in right-hand reliever Kyle Keller. Kyle Keller, for those that don't know, is a 30-year-old who had a 2.59 ERA and 74 strikeouts in 59 innings of the last 2 seasons in Japan's Central League. Stearns is notorious for finding arms in creative ways, and in which they've had great success at the MLB level. The Brewers, what are they known for? They've been known for their pitching lab. Successful rotation year after year. Successful bullpen year after year. And they don't just do this with great drafting. They do it as well by being very smart with their scouting in the free agent and trade markets every single year. Picking up guys that maybe you haven't heard too much about them, and then bam, they go on to be a huge setup man for the ensuing season going forward. This is what Stearns is known for. This is in part why you brought him in. So for everyone just scoffing, saying, oh my God, why do the Mets want all these Joe Schmoes, these depth pieces, nobody's. 1, you need depth pieces. We all do. 2, again, the guys the Mets want are not coming off the market yet, the top dogs, the headliners. And 3, he's shown success while having these exact types of methods. I'm going to go on a limb. Call me crazy. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that the Mets hired David Stearns in direct part because of exactly what he's done with previous organizations. Crazy concept, I know. But this does not mean that the Mets are going to go out here and say, hey, we're not doing anything in 2024. They're going to absolutely put their best foot forward and have a competitive roster. We know that. So I'm just trying to enlighten people to calm yourself a little bit. You guys jumped the gun so quick. It could be literally the first day of November. You're like, why haven't we signed Ohtani? Like, I get these comments on a daily basis. It's one thing as a fellow fan where you can tune them out. It's another where you talk about the Mets for a living every single day. They get hundreds of comments saying, Wardy, why are we the Wilpons again? Wardy, what is going on? This makes no sense. After I constantly explain it to you again and again and again. Like, stop making me repeat myself, please. Just listen a little bit. Pay attention. I assure you, things will happen. And no one wants them more than me. As a content creator, what, you think I enjoy repeating myself every single day? That's been the case lately. I can't do anything about it. And you can't either. We just have to sit here and be patient and wait. Let's see. Be careful, this offseason scares me. I'm not scared about this offseason. I just want to know what's going to happen. That's all I want to know. Let's see. John Morosi said Lucas Giolito's drawing interest from Dodgers, Mets, Red Sox, Diamondbacks, and Royals. We'll get into that Giolito talk here in a minute, because in a minute or so, we are going to have my man Giraffe Neck Mark in here. So stay tuned for that. Oh, Mark's already in here. All right, so give me a second, Mark. My apologies if you texted me. Okay, that's my bad, Mark. Give me 1 second. So the one and only Mark Luino is going to join in 1 second. Mark and I are going to talk shop on all the latest with the Mets. And of course, we're going to start the conversation by breaking down how the Mets had a huge loss by missing out on Eric Fedde. So bear with me 1 second, and we're going to bring Mark in here. Almost there. Give me 1 second, everybody. Sorry, I know I was pretty ranty to start the show, but I got things on my mind, and I got to let it loose. A lot of things are happening right now. Some of it is certainly frustrating with how the fan response is. Am I surprised? No. Am I disappointed? Yes. I'm like I'm like a father right now. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. That's directed at many of you in the fan base, and you know who you are. So let me throw this on right now, and now let's bring in Mark. Okay. Mark, do you hear me?
I got you. You hear me?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I'm going to frame you so you look nice and pretty in the box right now.
Sure, thank you.
Big time right now. So give me 1 second. While I do that, though, Mark, for those that are living under a rock, please enlighten them who you are and where they can find you.
Yep. What's up? Draft Neck Mark. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all social media. You can find me there. And like Wardy, big time Mets fan. Got the Mets Stuff podcast with the team that I do with James. And host that comes out once a week during the off season, twice a week during the regular season after every series. And then, the YouTube channel, Draft Neck Mark, where we're talking about all things baseball, obviously Mets focus since I am a Mets fan, but it is a more broader stroke than just Mets focused entirely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, please make sure to check Mark out, guys, if you haven't already. Again, the co-hosts with James Shiano, the two beauties there at Mets Up, the official podcast of the New York Mets. But let's just hop right into this one, guys. I do have a stream deck. Someone said that in chat. That's funny, but I have it disabled right now. Okay, Mark, I got to know, before we even get into anything, just give me your initial thoughts on how the offseason has went, not only for the Mets so far, but baseball as a whole, because it's been underwhelming.
It's just for everybody. It's slow. It's really slow for everybody. Hoping it picks up here. I think everybody's waiting for Shohei Ohtani, that domino to fall. And I think once he does, it's going to start to pick up really quickly. Nola signed quickly. Sonny Gray signed quickly. Two guys that we kind of expected to be off the market relatively quickly. Don't want Blake Snell to set it for guys like those because he's just better. But it's been slow. Although while the Mets haven't gone after any big names, I've been optimistic about what we've done thus far.
Yeah, so have I. And don't get me wrong, I can understand fan reaction at times when the only thing you're hearing are just guys that are not going to be more than maybe like a half win in WAR or something. Like, I completely understand it. But as I'm sure you heard the tail end of my rant, I think we all just need to not only calm our expectations, but just calm ourselves, because this is the case for every team in baseball for the most part right now. Unless you're in on Ohtani, because that's the big domino that we need to fall for the floodgates to open. A lot of teams are in similar boats. They really can't do too much yet because these players are waiting to see how the market's going to shape up, in part because of Ohtani. So, there's a lot of things going on right now. It's been an underwhelming winter meetings. My question to you is, have you seen a winter meetings this quiet through the first couple days?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you remember the winter meetings when Harper and Machado were free agents, I mean, those guys didn't sign until like way later in the offseason. So that's the last one that I remember that was particularly slow. And if you think about it, like in terms of like generational type talent, obviously they're not Shohei Ohtani, but they're relatively the same in like these are going to be $300 million plus guys. Everybody had been hyped for them. Everybody had circled that year for when those guys were going to hit the free agent market. So, it sucks that it's moving slow, but I don't know. At least it's moving slow for everybody, like you said. It's not like anybody is going out crazy, making these insane moves to make their team that much better. Like, whoop-de-doo, the Cardinals got Sonny Gray. That team still stinks. Like, I don't know what to say
there. Spoken exactly how I expect you to say it, Mark. So I think before we advance further, I think we should just have a moment of silence for James Shiano on not landing the player you wanted most this offseason, and the one and only Eric Fedde. I didn't realize just how enamored he was with him until I saw yesterday. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, James! Like, this is a big deal." And I watched him. I was like, "Okay, I can see that now." How's James doing right now? I'm sure you've been texting him.
Yeah, the texts for him, I broke the news to him, and a couple of expletives, one that rhymes with truck, and then he was like, I can't believe it's over. I can't believe the Fedde watch is over. He's got to be the most excited that I've seen anybody ever be about Eric Fedde. I know he pitched well in the KBO. I was not nearly as excited. I trust James. I trust his insight when it comes to pitching. Call him the pitching whisperer. But I've seen Eric Fedde pitch way too many times in my life to get excited about him. I think it was more so the fact that he improved upon his game and he was going to be so cheap. That's one thing I'll give to James, is that if he was costing $5 million a year for 2 years, like, sure, worth a shot. Like, how bad can he be? If he is, you kick him to the curb. But I'm not losing sleep over Eric Fedde, maybe as much as James.
Per year for 2 years for a guy that profiles best as a swingman / a six man in your rotation.
Yeah.
That's why it just feels pretty obvious that the White Sox signed him to be clearly a starter. And I just don't foresee the Mets having that same commitment, even with their holes right now. I just don't see it. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, the comparison that everyone's giving is Merrill Kelly, obviously, because Merrill Kelly was bad and went to KBO and got better, and now he pitched in the World Series and he was great. But I don't know. You gotta see what Fedde's got until we can make those comparisons like fairly. It's almost kind of like when like a Japanese player comes over and people just compare him to whoever the latest greatest guy is that's come, which is probably not fair to anybody in that sense. But yeah, I don't know. I think Fedde would have probably been in the rotation, but I don't think the Mets wanted him to be. Like, I don't think they would have been comfortable if they were like, Eric Fedde's the 4. Like, this is the guy we're going to every 5 days. Like, we're relying on him to give us major innings. I think it was hey, if he could give us major innings, that's a plus. But, like, he's more of a depth piece.
Exactly. You can never have enough depth. We've learned that. Even when the Mets on paper look like they have it all figured out, Jared Eichhoff is pitching 2 months into the season. So, you never know exactly what's going to happen on that front with uncertain injuries and just lack of consistency that we saw in great part in the first half with David Pearson, for example, who's now going to be out for a bit with his own ailment. But we do have a donation from Pat. Thank you so much. Pat Benson says, all I wanted for Christmas was Matt Chapman just to find Cole, a.k.a. Beatty, and my stocking. Thank you for the donation, Pat. I'm not someone that is in the market for Matt Chapman personally. Really not all. I was a Chapman fan for a while, still am, but there are a lot of aspects about his game that I can understand why the Mets don't really have interest there. David Stearns has said it himself that the Mets will be staying internal, at least for now, for third base, and that makes plenty of sense there. So let's go back to the pitching front, right? You know all about Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I'm not going to ask you this simple question of, who is this guy? How good is he? If you've been living under a rock, you would need those questions answered, but that's not the case here. So we know David Stearns reiterated today that the Mets, of course, are involved in the pitching market, and while they, of course, wouldn't be opposed to like a frontline starter, he knows that he can build rotations in very creative ways. I didn't take that as a negative whatsoever. It's really reaffirming what he said in a recent interview. We know Stearns is notorious for not only building rotations, but bullpens alike in very creative ways in which they've had continued success, like during their time in Milwaukee. So when you look at Yamamoto's market, you see a lot of teams in the Dodgers and the Yanks, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays have been a sliver in there. The San Francisco Giants would love him. When you evaluate his market right now, what would you say your confidence level is in the Mets in this heavy pursuit?
I really think it's going to be 50-50. I think it's a coin flip. I think they're going to give him the best offer. I think they're going to offer him the most money. And I think that they have just as good a chance as anybody to sign him. I really think it's probably down to the Mets and Yankees. And it's going to just come down to what team he wants to play for. He might want to go to the Yankees because, I don't know, a guy like Tanaka was there, and Tanaka's like a stud back in Japan. Maybe he wants to follow in his footsteps. I know he said he hasn't cared about playing with, or he's open to playing with another Japanese player, so I wouldn't say it's a negative for the Mets by any means. But, I mean, relatively speaking, the Yankees are a bigger team, a bigger brand, a bigger franchise than the Mets, as much as I hate to say it. I wouldn't be shocked if you pick them over the Mets. I'm not counting out any other teams, but I do think that the top two right now are Mets and Yankees, and I think it's a coin flip. Like, it comes down to him, and we really don't know what's going on in his head. Like, at least with Ohtani, we know what he's looking for, what he wants. He wants to win. He wants things to be quiet. Like, he's a very professional manner. With Yamamoto, we know, like, he just wants to play. He wants to win. He wants to get paid money. So who's going to do that for him? Probably the Mets and Yankees, the top two teams.
Right. And it very well could be a situation where if Yamamoto is in love with the idea of being a Yankee because maybe he grew up idolizing them, wouldn't shock me. Because, again, when you put on your non-bias cap and you think, especially outside the States, the first teams you think of when you think of Major League Baseball are the Yanks and the Red Sox. It'll always be that way, at least for a long period of time. So I can't fault him if that was always like a dream of his and he ends up going there. I might not be happy about it, but I'm not going to beat up the Mets over it because there very well could be a situation where the Mets have the most most money on the table, and he still decides to go to the Yanks. But and this really comes down to a bidding war, which is looking like it's going to. This is where Steve Cohen and David Stearns is like, in my opinion, if you're going to pull a trigger on anyone where you're clearly going to be overpaying, I think this is the exception for someone like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, even with the posting fee, just from the age, the talent, the early expectations, the longevity that he's likely going to have in his career. What box doesn't he check off, I think, is the rightful argument you can make while evaluating him as a potential Mets fit. But we talked about Yamamoto. He's in a class of his own. Now let's get into other guys out there. Jordan Montgomery, Eduardo Rodriguez, Shota Imanaga. Latest today, the Mets have interest in Lucas Giolito. Give me your little rundowns at each of these players and what you like about them, and if you think the Mets are better off with ones over the other.
Yeah, I mean, Imanaga is going to get the most comps to Kodai, not because they pitch the same, but because they'll probably end up costing the same. Similar kind of contract. Imanaga pitched in the World Baseball Classic. In the finals, he pitched against Team USA in like 3 or 4 innings, I think. He's got a pretty good fastball, like low to mid 90s, but it's got a good IVB, so it looks like it rises. And just like works a sweeper, which is rare from a left-handed starting pitcher. We don't see that often in Major League Baseball. He's got very good stuff. Could be one of the more underrated pitchers on the market right now because there is so much hype around Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Erod, I like him. I think he's a very good pitcher. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be like pumped. Again, we'd all prefer Yamamoto over these guys, but he'd be a very, very good fallback option. He's had some great years. He's pitched in big games. Talk about some experience and just a big game pitcher. Eduardo Rodriguez has that. I don't know if the Mets are necessarily going to get him. Giolito feels like it could be more realistic because his market might be weird because of how poorly he's pitched recently. And shout out to James for this one. Apparently, like all the other stuff is good. It's just the fastball. Like if he can get that fastball back, which is a huge if, it's really not easy. Now. Yeah, it's really not easy to just be like, hey, if he pitches better with the one pitching that he's not pitching well with, he can return to form. But I mean, maybe the Mets try something like him, take a flyer on him if that's what he's looking for. I could also see somebody also recognizing that he's like one pitch away from being back to where he was, giving him a better contract. The pitching market is so weird right now, especially for the Mets who need a lot of it, where they need to be like passively aggressive, where it's like be smart, go after the guys that you think you can make an impact with, but also don't freak out because Erod's there and you're like, well, if we don't have Eduardo Rodriguez, like what are we going to do? Like, I don't know how much better he makes this team without all the other pieces falling in place too.
And I made note of this yesterday. The Mets are in a little bit of a tricky situation because they want Yamamoto. He's their priority number 1 right now, but he's also going to take his dear sweet time.
Yep.
And during that time, there's a great chance that Erod, Monty, maybe Imanaga, possibly Giolito could fall off the board by then. So if you're the Mets here, what's the proper way to operate in that situation, right? Because it doesn't feel like the Mets would land both a Yamamoto and a Monty, as great as that idea is. It feels like it'll be one or the other. So while on one hand, you can say, okay, if this market isn't going as fast as maybe they thought, if Monty and Erod maybe even wait a little bit, especially Monty, if that goes in hand, if his decision maybe goes in hand with what the Mets do with Yamamoto, I'm not exactly sure. But if they put themselves in a spot where they're like, hey, you know what, we're going to hang tight because Yamamoto is priority number 1, and these dominoes fall, and say you don't land Yamamoto, then your offseason in that sense is cooked, right? So what do you think is the best course of action for this Mets team when evaluating when Yamamoto is expected to be gone versus guys? We've heard a lot of rumblings on Monty and Erod. These feel like guys that I expect to drop within the next week.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Monty, like you said, he definitely feels like he's more the backup option if we don't land Yamamoto. I'd be happy with that. Gamecock, just like me, like Jordan Montgomery, he's been a very good pitcher and big game pitcher, something the Yankees probably wish that they didn't trade him away for. But had to throw that dig in there any chance I get. But yeah, I mean, like, I think the Yamamoto move really dictates the entire offseason for the Mets, and I think they're not going to make any significant move until they know what's going on there, because if you get him, you are now in a scenario where you do have a good 1-2. Like, you have your two-headed monster with Senga and Yamamoto. You have Severino, you have Quintana. There's 4 right there. And then you fill it in with Miguel, Peterson, like all these guys are going to be the backups. Budo, maybe Mike Vassell gets called up. That's when you can start to fill in and grab some of maybe like the Giolitos or some of the other pitchers that are available on the market. But without it, I don't know how aggressive the Mets are, and you probably start taking more flyers on. I mean, I'm trying to think of some like random pitchers, not necessarily like a Michael Wacha per se, but of that ilk of guys who are going to be like 1-year deals for cheap that are going to give you innings. And I know that's probably not what Mets fans want to hear. It's not sexy at all to be like, they're just going to fill it in with a bunch of guys who can give you innings, but the way that this rotation is built, it desperately needs Yamamoto. And if Montgomery is going to go this week, I don't want them to overpay on Montgomery because of necessity to feel like you need to have that guy this year.
Right. And again, I understand the pros and the cons of this situation. Like Monty, I think would be an awesome fit. Mainly, I'm appealed by not only the not breakout season, but just his best season to date. I love how comfortable he was going from St. Louis to Texas and really being a huge driver in that rotation to help win them their championship. But it's the ability to pitch in a big market with the spotlight on you the way he did so well during his time with the Yanks. Stern said it himself, guys that have that previous experience is something that they keep in mind and make note of, and that surely helps them evaluate going after someone like Montgomery. But again, this is a situation where, the Mets may very well find themselves missing out on some of these, which makes it that much more imperative. Not that you want to show true desperation, but again, if you're really going to overpay, maybe even a significant amount, I think Yamamoto, again, is that exception. Now, my question, the live chat, let us know, how would you guys feel about a hypothetical rotation consisting of the following? Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, Lucas Giolito, and Luis Severino as your 5. Let me know how you guys feel about that. And then your 6, of course, would be a Tyler McGill, a Joey Lucchesi. You go from there. You're likely going to need a 6-man, which is why I think it would still be smart to add more than just a Giolito after that. It's not going to be a flashy name. It's not going to be sexy, as you said, but guys that can come in and eat innings and hopefully, with Jeremy Hefner, work on them right. Get just some of these pitches, like you said, it's a one-pitch issue with Giolito. So is that something that could be rectified, given the fact he's only 29? I also will not forget the fact that Giolito, 2 big things that stand out to me about him. 1, he has not been the same pitcher since the sticky substance breakdown 2 years ago. That is clear as day. And 2, unfortunately for his case, he was dealing with a divorce mid-season this year, which definitely plays a factor. Like, these guys are human beings at the end of the day. Okay, so the fact that he dropped that statement like during the home run derby caught me off guard and everyone off guard, I feel like. So he's got his own things going on aside from baseball, and hopefully he's in a better mindset than he was, say, during midseason with the Chicago White Sox, which I think being a White Sox in general can cause a lot of frustration, because I feel like you don't have any support there. You just do whatever you want. There is nowhere to turn to. Lance Lynn, Lucas, these guys have said it themselves. It just, you go in, you work, that's it. Like, there's no direction. So, okay, we talked about starting pitching. Let's get into a little bit on the fun discussion here, and that is the wide range of options in the outfield market. Now, Stearns said yesterday that the Mets are definitely in the market for at least one. Whether he's more offensive or defensive is yet to be seen. We've heard their connections to Michael A. Taylor, which I think makes plenty of sense as a 4th outfielder, a guy that can handle platoons in situations against lefties. Then you see the other names, whether they be a little bit more on the sexier end in a Jean-Hou Lee. At least on paper, a lot of people like him. The Mets reportedly have strong interest, according to Bob Nightingale, everyone's favorite. Or then you have other options, whether it's, say, a Teoscar Hernandez or Lourdes Gurriel, not players that the Mets are actively connected to as they were connected for a Manuel Margot as, say, a 4th outfield option. But these guys can certainly provide more power, more upside. Kevin Kiermaier, more defensively minded. Kevin would be awesome as a 4th outfielder, but not a guy I want starting every single day in left. And then from there, you look at trade options, shooting for the stars. Randy Rosarena's available. Why not go all in and get him? Stern said it himself today that the Mets, they have a willingness to trade prospects, but if they're going to do that, they need to make sure that they're getting those years of control back from a player. They're going to be reluctant to trade for rentals, mainly bigger names where you're giving up a boatload of things when you know you're getting a 1-year guy, when the Mets aren't in a position to really warrant doing that as a club that only has playoff aspirations heading into next season. They don't have that World Series or bust label on them they had heading into 2023. So when you look at the outfield market as a whole and what Stearns is trying to do here, what do you like and what do you not like?
Yeah, I mean, I like Teoscar Hernandez a lot. We've seen some really, really top-end stuff out of him. I know last year was a little bit of a down year with Seattle, but he did heat up towards the end of the season. And I just like the ability that while he is more of a DH in the way that he's not a very good defensive outfielder, he's definitely bat first. He can play the outfield, where like a guy like Soler is so bad in the outfield. You'd really only want him as DH or a JD Martinez, those kind of realm. Michael A. Taylor, I'm not going to pretend like I'm excited about it because, I mean
why
like
would he be?
He's not a sexy name by any means. And like, I know he's going to drive me nuts when I see him like swing and miss with the bases loaded in a game one day. But like in terms of actually improving the team and bringing value, if he was the everyday center fielder until Drew Gilbert's ready, which could maybe be as soon as May, June, like something like that, They could rock a platoon out there in center field if they really wanted to. He is going to give you elite defense in center. And it does allow you to move Nimmo to left, which Nimmo is obviously a plus center fielder. He'll be even better in left field. And it does kind of let him age a little better, just because it's going to be a lot less taxing on his body for a guy who we know does struggle with injuries at times, gets nicked up every once in a while and misses, 10, 15 games a season. It's not the biggest of concerns yet, but for a guy that we do have signed long-term, I would love to see maybe an easing into that corner spot. And Michael A. Taylor could do that. Again, not cool. I'm not going to be like, yes, Michael A. Taylor, the missing piece here. But it seems like the Mets are really pushing hard on him. I personally would love Cody Bellinger, but that's a pipe dream. It's not happening. I've talked myself into thinking that makes so much sense. But
I as talented as Belly is, I don't see the fit because I don't like the idea of committing long-term to him.
That's the scary part. Is that we saw 1 year of him playing well when he didn't hit the ball as hard, and he got a lot of his home runs in the gap at Wrigley Field, which has like the smallest gaps in Major League Baseball. So there's definitely a concern that those power numbers are fake, especially because the exit velo did drop. But he is very good. I mean, last year he still was very good. Like you said, the years and the money that you'd be committing to him is scary. It's not going to happen either. This is a pipe dream. This is I'm shooting for the stars. But I really like Teoscar Hernandez out of all the guys that are available. Lourdes Gurriel, I know, is a solid player, but I don't think his stuff is going to age well. I think it's going to age like milk, like a high contact, low power guy who's like not the greatest of athletes and definitely not a good left fielder. It's a little scary. There's nobody really particularly great on the market in terms of outfield that's going to make someone excited. And there's also like Starling Marte, which
according to David is full. I mean, and Mendoza, both him and McNeil alike are fully healthy. They're expected to have normal ramp up for spring, which is good in theory. Like, are we really sitting here thinking that Starling Marte is one, going to be your starting right fielder consistently, but two, do it at a good clip? Because when Marte was out there, regardless of his health, even when you think he is healthy, he's struggling to run on the bases. He's very picky about doing that to begin with. His right field defense, I'm sorry, it was trash. Really bad. Like a shell of what he normally is. And that's why I pray that Marte being rebuilt again, we can build him stronger. I'm hoping that's the case for next season, but I'm not getting my hopes up. And nor should the Mets operate in that fashion, which is why adding at minimum one, if not multiple outfielders makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately for us fans, this is just not really that sexy of a market. Free agency as a whole this year isn't all that sexy. It's very top heavy. It's not like previous years past. So that goes in hand with the Mets thought process for 2024 as well. If this was a flooded free agent market with all these beautiful outfield options, beautiful third base options, it would be different, because it seems like, especially at third base, a reason in part why the Mets are allowing this internal battle to go on is, of course, they want to see what the Beattys, the Mauricios, the Vientoses can do in a larger sample size, but they also don't want to give the money to Matt Chapman, who's the best available option out there. And I don't blame them whatsoever for doing that. It's like, don't sign a guy just because he's like the best of mid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want to double down on a problem that you already have by trying to, like, Matt Chapman's a good baseball player. I think we all agree.
Absolutely.
But similar to the concerns that like you would have with a Bellinger, you have the same concerns with Matt Chapman. Like, he's already a guy who's had like a bad back and bad hip or whatever was going on in his career. And he hasn't really been the same. He was scalding hot at times last season with the Blue Jays, like one of the best hitters to start the year. He had that stretch in the second half where he was unstoppable, but going into his 31, 32-year-old season, for a guy who's had some injury concerns, his play has already started to diminish a little bit. It's like, you have to be smart. And I think, and this is like the thing that nobody wants to hear, but like the 2025 offseason is a big one. The Mets need to reset the payroll, the luxury tax at some point. There's no reason to stay over it because we signed Matt Chapman. That's just like, you sign Shohei Ohtani, you sign Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Those make sense. Matt Chapman to stay over the luxury tax for another year, it's like, is that really the guy we want to do it for? No.
And again, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something to really take into consideration. If the Mets don't land Yamamoto, that can have a significant impact on what else they do this offseason versus otherwise. Like, that luxury tax threshold is a big thing. And when you look at next year, there is this one guy by the name of Juan Soto that will be available, regardless of him inevitably looking like he's going to be a Yankee or a Blue Jay, wherever the hell he's going to go. So I think that's also in part why the Mets are completely reluctant to trade for him, because no matter how much Steve Cohen may gas the guy up, it feels like he's going to hit the market regardless on how much of an overpay you might give him. I mean, unless you sway him to the point of getting a 15-year extension, I don't see it happening. I really just don't. But before we advance further, because I want to talk a little bit more about Jorge Soler and these DH options, both internally and externally, I want to thank everyone so much for chiming in. We have over 600 concurrent viewers. Make sure to subscribe to Draft Mark on YouTube if you haven't. One of the best MLB YouTubers out there, as always, coming out with awesome content. Check him out also as the co-host of the Mets Stuff podcast, the official podcast of the Mets you can get wherever you watch or listen to your podcast. Yoshima gifted membership to Bobby G. Thank you so much for that, Yoshima. Greatly appreciate your comment. Member for 34 months says, I need Yoshi for personal reasons on top of the main reason. Also, 34 months is crazy. It is crazy, Yoshima, but you've been a long-time supporter, and I greatly appreciate that. So now let's dive into the DH position. Of course, David Stearns, when asked today about DH, said, you know, like, when speaking internally, yeah, our two options right now stand with DJ Stewart and Mark Vientos. Nothing David said was wrong, but naturally, Mets fans, you can find a certain group saying, okay, that means they're 100% out on any DH option. We're rolling strictly Vientos and DJ Stewart. That's how it's going to be. No, he was just saying that internally, these are our options. Same way how last year, if you asked, internally, our options were Darren Ruff, Daniel Vogelbach. You know, you're just listing what you have. That's all it is. But when speaking in that regard, I've been under the belief that the Mets have a reluctancy to go past a one-year deal for a DH type, given what's currently available out there. But if they're going to go past 1 year, what's your thoughts on Jorge Soler? Pat Ragazzo, when I had him on yesterday, really predicted that he feels like Soler is the most likely big bat candidate the Mets would land over, say, a Justin Turner, a JD Martinez, among some others.
You don't think they're going to bring back Vogelbach? He's available. He's going to be free this spring, I think. He's going to have a job opening.
Did you get a chance to interview Vogie?
Yeah, he's a really nice dude.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
He's the nicest guy. And like, he was super nervous after we were done. He took like a deep breath. He was like, whew. He was like, wow, that was really easy. It's like, yeah, man, I'm not going to like grill you. Like, we want to like be friendly with you. And like, I have respect
plus
for you.
Plus you work for the Mets. It's not like this is an outside party where you're going to be like, dude, why are you fucking trash? Like, no,
how many cheeseburgers did you eat this week? Like, not going to ask you that. But it's like, at the end of the day, I think out of all the DH options that are not named Shohei Ohtani, yes, Jorge Soler, I think, is my favorite. Age-wise, production-wise, we've seen him hit 40, 50 home runs in Kansas City. We saw him hit a ton of home runs last year in Miami. Citi Field plays big. Those parks play bigger. So there's no doubt that he would come here and be able to be super, super valuable to this team. And he would be better than our options that we have. Like, I think Vientos has some crazy pop. There's no doubt. And DJ Stewart was great last year and could be great this year. The projections by Steamer love him. I think he's like a plus WRC plus guy this year in terms of the average hitter. So I like those guys, but I don't want them to be number one if possible. I mean, Jorge Soler would definitely just lengthen this lineup a lot. And if you start even building out the lineup, like you think about just a world where Pete and Soler could be hitting back-to-back with each other, with Lindor and Nimmo and whoever else is going to hit in front of them. Francisco Alvarez will be in the lineup. Like all of a sudden you're looking at this team, you're like, this team's got a lot of power. It changes the whole dynamic of what this team could look like. I'd love to see him. I trust David Stearns in saying we're going with our internal options, and I think maybe he's playing a little bit coy, which would be cool. I would love that. I would love if like one day we're like, whoa, he surprised us all. He got Jorge Soler. But I'm tending to believe David Stearns until I see otherwise, which is a little bit refreshing as well as a Mets fan. Like, I don't think he's going to lie to us like maybe previous GMs or presidents have done for this organization. But I also respect how quiet they have been, because that's also something that I always applaud the Atlanta Braves for. You never know what's going on there, and they steal guys left and right.
And you and I both know what it's like to look at someone and clearly tell if they haven't had sleep. Stearns looks like that right now. So like, I was reiterating to start the show. I'm like, what, you think everyone's like, Stearns is sleeping? I promise you, he's probably doing anything but that. Like, see, if I'm only getting a couple hours of sleep, just covering him, I can only imagine what it's like to be in his shoes right now. And I said this yesterday too. I think people keep forgetting as well just how much he has to do in such a short period of time when he wasn't supposed to have all this pressure on his shoulders. Billy Epler was supposed to be here. Like, people thinking that Epler was going to have no impact or say aren't paying attention. Like, he was going to definitely play a part to a degree in some of the decisions the Mets made this offseason. So by not having him, that was a little bit of a curveball thrown Stearns' way to kickstart his Pobo.
And if you look at how the Brewers have been built in previous years, and this will kind of tie together all three positions that we talked about, like that final outfield spot, that third base position, that DH spot. If you look at how they've been built the last 3-4 years, those positions have relatively been revolving doors. And one of the reasons they have been is because you're able to find production through platoons, through splits, through getting guys off. I don't want to say the scrap heap because that's like the worst thing to ever say to a Mets fan. We have PTSD with that. But yeah, the idea is like we're not going to pay a premium price at a position that can relatively be filled in by anybody. Like we have a bunch of options at third base. Let's see what they got. If Brett Baty and Mark Vientos and Ronnie Mauricio all stink, that sucks. That really hurts.
Approach it at the trade deadline at earliest.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, then you attack that problem when it happens. But as of right now, there are 3 guys who can theoretically play that position who Mets fans last spring were begging to get play. So it's like how quickly people change when they see like I'm not calling you out. I'm calling everybody else out.
No, I'm just saying I was on SNY last year saying I want Baty over Eddie. That was before it even happened. So
like we all have been those guys. So it's like if we're gonna be that eager to have these guys up from spring training, you can't give up on them when you've seen 200, 300, 400 at bats. Sometimes it takes these guys years to develop into the full players that they are. So yeah, like people will disagree with me. We need to go get this. We need to go get that. I'm telling you right now, out of the positions that we need, none of these players are going to make as big of an impact as the starting pitching will. And that's something that, look at how the Brewers have been built. That's a team that's been built on pitching. Like they've had enough offense with great pitching. And we have a way better offense than the Brewers ever have already without those guys. I think it's really easy to point fingers and say third base, DH. We got to get Daniel Vogel back last year. These guys stunk. There's no doubt that they were underperforming, but I have all the faith in Baty, Mauricio. Vientos I have a little bit less in just because I'm a little scared with his swing and miss stuff. But Baty and Mauricio I have all the faith in. And I think that we're going to be able to be smart about the guys rather than overspending on like a Matt Chapman, somebody mentioned earlier, or going out and spending, giving JD Martinez a 3-year deal because he wants this to be the last contract he ever signs. That wouldn't be smart. I don't know if that's what he wants, but it wouldn't be smart. Just be smart. And I trust David Stearns. The guy's built winners out of nothing. I trust him.
So third base in particular, I've never been bothered by the Mets staying internally. Like when that was said heading into the offseason, I was hoping that was going to be the case. Because unless you're going out of your way and say trading for Jose Ramirez or something, like there's not a lot of options out there that are appealing. Yes, we heard the Alex Bregman rumors. But if I'm being frank, I'm not really all that interested in trading for Alex Bregman. That's going to be on the market a year or so from now. And truthfully, if you look at Bregman's numbers, they're, again, don't get me wrong, I would be excited if the Mets landed him. So I'm not going to try to be, I'm trying not to be a hypocrite here. But playing devil's advocate, if you look at his numbers, there are some ridiculous splits depending on the ballpark he's playing in. Like one spot he could be hitting 40 bombs, another it's 13. There's a lot of uncertainty with Bregman as a guy who's won a lot already in his young career. You have to, I don't necessarily say want to question the drive, but now it's time for him to get a big payday, just like Correa. That's priority number one, and that needs to be taken into account while evaluating these players. But Baty, Mauricio, to a lesser degree, Vientos. Mark, I'm the least high on when playing third base. However, I think power, I would probably have him right in that category with Ronnie, with Baty below them. Brett went through a lot of internal, like, mental struggles this season, too. Just couldn't lift the ball. I said it yesterday. He's the perfect quadruple A player. He's way too good to be in Syracuse, and he's yet to prove himself at the MLB level. He needs to lift that ball. Hopefully he can do that. Ronnie, I think there's a great chance Ronnie could be a 20-plus home run guy for the Mets next season
100%.
If he plays every single day. Like, clearly proves his worth. That can be utilized at third base, second base at times. If you move Jeff to the corner every now and then, you get creative with those matchups. But that power with Ronnie definitely cannot be slept on. It's just a matter of how consistent of a clip can he really be on getting on base to warrant him playing every single day.
And I think there's going to be, like, sometimes competition brings out the best in you. And right now, like, he's left it open as like, we're not going to say anybody, maybe even until opening day. Like, who's going to be playing best? That's who's going to get the playing time at third base. And I think that's something that's going to be good because people I know are so hard on Brett Baty, and I have a lot of opinions. Like, I think a lot of it had to do with maybe who was in charge of why Brett Baty wasn't doing so well. But like, I think given the competition, given the opportunity, knowing like if I play well, this is my spot. We know what's happening coming in. Where last year, relatively speaking, none of these guys really knew where they stood going into the season.
Right.
Like Baty knew but he didn't have a clue per se. It wasn't until later in the year.
And Beatty did all he could early on to be with the team right away, and they were just still trying to give that leash to Eddie. So I'm glad we don't have that guy in the way again. Another year of a veteran that really shouldn't be here, still here, you know?
Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, Brett Beatty is 24 years old. He's had 400 plate appearances in Major League Baseball, and they've been bad. There's no way around it. Like, a 600 OPS, 400 plate appearances has been bad. But you can, like, go back and look at so many players who just, it takes time. He might not be, well, I'll tell you this. He's not going to be Nolan Arenado. He's not going to be Manny Machado. He's not going to be Jose Ramirez. He's not going to be Austin Riley. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But to give up on the immense talent that he's shown already, or to give up on Mauricio or even Vientos, like, it's way too early. I think we've been spoiled as baseball fans where we see guys like Julio Rodriguez, we see Bobby Witt Jr., we see Corbin Carroll come up and they're just the best players in the league. That's like not how 90% of Major League Baseball players start. It just doesn't happen that way. Even with the Mets, with Pete Alonso, he came up and was sick. That doesn't happen. So it's like sometimes you have to temper the expectations as a Met fan and just trust that these guys who have shown us so much before will be able to do it. And guess what? If they don't, you move on. That's what it is. You take them to the curb and you find who's next.
Yeah, and look, 2024 will be interesting how long of a leash Mets have with certain, young talent over others, because there's always those debates that we've seen from years past. And we can definitely say that the Mets maybe haven't operated exactly how we would have liked with some of these guys, either calling them up too late or calling them up too early. But what we know now, especially in the case of Brett, it's funny, talking about Chapman and then Beatty, considering last offseason, Beatty spent a good portion of his offseason working with Troy Tulowitzki, Matt Chapman, and Bo Bichette there in Texas. So I don't know if that recipe is going to be the case again this offseason. Maybe not, because we didn't get the results we were looking for. Maybe stay away from Tulo. I'm not sure. But third base is going to be certainly one to follow this regular season to see who not only stands out most, but who's going to crack that job to be more often than not your everyday third baseman. But Mark, we're going to wrap things up here shortly. Before I get you out of here, want to answer a donation. Says Mets fan since 82. Thank you for a donation. He says, I would like to see the Mets overpay and get this Yamamoto contract done. I would be devastated if the Yankees sign him. We all would be. But I will say this. If the Yanks sign Yamamoto, I find it unbelievably hard to believe that it'll be because of factors that the Mets can control. I feel very strongly in saying that, and that is why, while it will suck, I feel like we will know exactly why from everything we've already discussed at this point. So, two things before I let you out of here, Mark. One, what are your thoughts on the relief market right now? Because this is a complete toss-up. There's plenty of names that I like, but truthfully have no damn clue who's going where. It's not even some previous off seasons have felt more certain. Like, I want David Robertson back for obvious reasons as potentially setup man. Not sure how you feel about that, but how do you feel about the relief market right now? Are there any names that maybe pop out to you that haven't been linked to the Mets to this point? And then secondly, give me your most realistic offseason for the New York Mets from now going forward.
Yeah, I love the reliever market this year. That's kind of something James has opened up my eyes a little bit to, is that there's just always so much value in terms of who's available on the reliever market. And you don't want to overpay. God forbid you do the thing that the Angels did to Aaron Loop and you give him way too much money to stink after he had like a career season and it was so obvious. Thank God the Mets didn't do that, because we never heard the end of that one. But like, I mean, even a guy like Hector Neris, who I know is like 35, a little bit older, but like, I'd give him a contract. Splitter, fastball. He wants to be the seventh inning guy. He wants to be a part of the B team bullpen. Sure, like David Robertson setup man, lock me in. I loved the way he pitched last year, and I would bring him back in a heartbeat. I think setup's the perfect spot for him. But I mean, you just like go through these pitchers, and Jordan Hicks is available. He probably wants to go be a closer and get paid, so it's probably going to be like I wouldn't pay him. But like if Jordan Hicks slips through the cracks, I'd love to get him. Robert Stevenson, I'd pay him. I like him a lot. He's like my favorite reliever on the market right now.
Didn't you have him going to the Mets in your prediction video?
I did. He's someone whose name I circled during COVID, just being bored, like when there was no baseball going on. And he was just like a pitcher who like hit these like super arbitrary benchmarks that I set that were like strikeout rate of 25% through 98, like had 4 different pitches. And it was like Robert Stevenson, and that was it in terms of relievers. He was somebody who's really interesting. I mean, there's so many good arms that you can go out and get and make something out of, like even like a Shintaro Fujinami, a guy who throws like 100 out of the bullpen.
Yeah, he would. That actually sounds like I might need to do a Fujinami video for a second straight year. Last offseason, I did a video saying Mets signing Fujinami would be like the perfect swing man. That's how I was evaluating him. And even though the control isn't there yet, he's got all the stuff. So just trying to piece it together.
I mean, like a guy that like I love. I've been begging the Mets to sign this guy forever, Jake Diekman. Like maybe some people won't
Are
get
you
excited
still on
about
the
this
Diekman
name.
train? I was
I'm
for a little. I don't
always
know.
on the
You're gonna be
Diekman
on that
train.
Diekman train until his ass retires. I can tell.
He throws too hard and his stuff moves too much for me to ever give up. Like, wow, he would
So
totally break our heart and like walk like 6 guys in one inning and everyone would freak out. But then like he's gonna have like a stretch of like 25 innings where he gives up like a hit and 1 run, and you're gonna be like, oh my God, like this guy is incredible. Where's he been my whole life?
So Diekman has been to you what up until this offseason Chafin has been for me. I've stopped going out of my way wanting Andrew Chafin, as I wouldn't be opposed to him whatsoever. Again, best look in the game among relievers, your favorite failed starter. However, the writing's been on the wall for a while now that he isn't going to come here. Could it be different now with David Stearns? Maybe. I mean, if you will say anything, Stearns probably watched a little bit of him when he got traded to Milwaukee last season. So that's possible. But a D-backs team traded him away for the betterment of their team. That's something to make note of too. So Chafin I wouldn't be opposed of, but I'm not going to say he needs to happen like I felt in the past 3 years where the Mets just continued to dodge him and say, nah, we're not going to make it happen.
Well, I think that's what's kind of nice about the bullpen is that you should never say this needs to happen. I think there's only been one needs to happen recently, and that was like we need to bring Edwin Diaz back. Like,
right.
Was it an overpay? Sure. Is paying a reliever that much crazy? Oh, 1,000,000%. But he is the best reliever, the best closer in baseball. He's absolutely nasty. He earned it, and we needed him. If you didn't have him, like we saw the bullpen was last year, didn't look great without him. So if there was ever like a stamp of approval of like how important he was to this team, just take a look last year. But there's so many arms, and I really do trust like Jeremy Hefner and Eric Yeagers and all the guys inside the Mets pitching lab to be able to identify who those guys are. Like even like a Kyle Crick has a wipeout slider. He's a minor league contract, but like for a guy who instead of maybe like I'm gonna just pick like an old name, but like instead of like Jacob Brame pitching, you have Kyle Crick who like actually has a pitch that's major league capable. It's like, oh, that's so much better than Denny Reyes. Like that makes me more excited.
So going back to a player you discussed a minute ago, that was Hector Neris. I know he had a great year with the Astros. I know since he landed in Houston, he's been good. But he's Familia 2.0, and you cannot tell me otherwise. There's just not a chance
I
in
love
hell where if the Mets land him, and he won't be a freaking batter's box. I know you love Familia. But
I'll never say a bad word about that guy. Off the field, bad. On the field, lights out. He was so good. Like I loved Jerry Familia on the mound for the Mets, but I totally understand why some people have some flashbacks.
Yes, some natural reservations when thinking about Hector Neris, because I just think about how much the Mets lit him up. Like even when he would go on nice stretches, it's like, oh, it was Mets time. All right, you're getting cooked. And this,
it's just the splitter. If the splitter was on, you couldn't touch him. If it wasn't, he'd give up 9 runs. The game was over. Like,
exactly. And I love how you said Jacob Brame. I think I was talking about yesterday, the day before, how I despise Rhys Hoskins in part for like going so hard after Rame as if he was purposely throwing at him. Are you kidding me? Really? Like, stop with the ego, Rhys. It's not that big of a deal. We're not going out of our way to try to give you this Bonds treatment or something. So I'm gonna say that right now.
I'm gonna throw us out there just to really stir the pot a little bit. What about Rhys Hoskins at DH?
This is what I mean. Does he profile well? Yeah, he does. Yeah. Do I like him? No. But will I embrace him if he comes here? Yes. I think him and Alonso as well could be this tandem that if you're Mets fans, you love, but if you're any other club, you absolutely despise.
Totally. Throw it again.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where I stand on Rhys. 2 comments here. Pat, thank you for your donation. Says, Uncle Steve can show everyone this is a new time, a new era. The Mets are not the Yankees' stepchild and outbid them. Hopefully, Pat, we'll see. Thank you for that donation. Woo Suk Go, who is the brother-in-law of Jun-Hoo Lee, coming over from the KBO, and the Mets' recent bullpen hire now for their coach, and Jose Rosado was most recently coaching in Korea. Could there be any type of connect? I'm not entirely sure. That is something to make note of. I know that Yuki Matsui, who's another interesting name coming over from overseas. These relievers, again, have plenty upside. I know that there's a little bit more risk concern when you land a KBO pitcher that's a reliever versus, say, getting them from the MPB. But the guy has been pretty solid. And just for the sake of having that connection, it would be interesting if, say, the Mets do land Jun-Hoo Lee, and that gives them a slight upper hand and also landing this guy. And again, as I don't know if you heard me say earlier, Stearns has had an act for landing guys in recent years, some from the MPB, some from the KBO. Like, this is not uncommon to him, so it would be the least shocking thing if the Mets went out for either. So, Mark, final thing before we get out of here, what is your as realistic as possible offseason prediction for the Mets going forward. How are they going to run out the rotation? What are they going to do with the offense and bullpen? I know that's a big toss-up, but feel free to just throw names that you think would make sense.
Yeah, I think the Mets will get Yamamoto. I want them to. I really hope they do. I think it's 50-50, and I'm going to lean on the sides that heads hits and we get Yamamoto. And then from there, I think they're going to continue to be aggressive, get some names, not bigger names. I think they're basically going to get one big name pitcher if they're going to get one. It's going to be Yamamoto or Montgomery, in my opinion. And then you fill it in with some of those filler guys that are not going to be fun, that people are going to freak out about. I'm not going to go the Eric Fedde route, but maybe like a Mike Clevenger route, maybe a Sean Manaea, something like that.
Clev had a very sneaky good season last year.
Very
no one talks about, because there was some off the field stuff going on with Clev too, which made it very hush hush on his end.
Yeah, bad guy. But at the end of the day, I hate to be this guy, but Mets fans are probably going to be mad about this offseason. And I'm going to tell you this right now, that makes me happy, because how excited have we been the last 2 off seasons as Mets fans? To the moon. We've been crazy. This is the greatest thing ever. And what has it turned out in? 1 win against the Padres in the wild card. Otherwise, pretty disappointing seasons. Even the year they won 100 games, disappointing. Didn't make it far enough. Weren't good enough. So I'm going to trust David Stearns. I'm going to trust the guy who's got the Brewers and their $0 payroll to the NLCS before, 1 game away from the World Series, and hope that he just knows better than everybody else who thinks they know better at home, which that's probably got to be the case. I mean, we know a little bit, but David Stearns got to know more.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's easy for us to play armchair GM all we want, but
yes,
I think David is the one guy where we should finally start to sit back, settle expectations, but also settle our reservations. I had fans on Twitter ask me today, why aren't you judging Stearns in his offseason? I'm like, what is exactly, Mark? Every single effing day. My response is, 1, what is there to judge when all the top guys they want are out there still right now? And we know everything, the factors that went into these decision makings to this point. So I don't really know what to do. Even if the Mets say on paper don't have a great offseason, I would still say to hold your judgment to a degree to see how the beginning of the year would go at absolute minimum. And even then, there's an argument to be had for and against. And I will say this, and then we're going to wrap up the live show for everybody. So thank you all so much for watching live and a replay. Greatly appreciated. Is the Mets with expectations crumbled like a mofo. They could not handle the pressure. We're going all the way back to as soon as they dealt with a lot of adversity in 2022 and overcame it. But when it came to adversity, when you're starting to lose games on more consistent rate, the boys didn't know how to snap out of it, especially against lesser clubs. And they were doomed from the start there. Nothing changed in 2023. It only got worse. As soon as the lights were on, I keep joking, it's like Trump. He's saying, turn those lights off.
Turn those lights off. They're too bright.
They just can't handle the pressure. And why should I expect anything different if the Mets went into next year with World Series aspirations? But they don't have that pressure now because they're not worried about 2 40-year-olds at the top of their rotation being a ticking time bomb, knowing you only have so much time to try to get a run with these guys. They don't have to worry about that now. There's a lesser expectations. And heading into 2022, all their aspirations, all the expectations with the fan base was to just make playoffs. That's all we wanted. They won 100 games. It unfortunately soured in a way that we weren't hoping to see after a great start, but expectations versus reality were certainly interesting. I think we're going to see a very fun, loose team in 2024 that we didn't see for 1 effing game for the most part, I felt, all this past season. You covering them with the Mets podcast, I'm sure it was brutal in large parts. Covering them every single night was even more brutal. So we just want entertaining baseball now, and if that can lead to playoffs, so be it. The Diamondbacks this year, the Phillies last year, these teams are proving all you got to do is be a couple games above 500.
Get there.
Sneak in and see what happens, right? So that's the mindset I have, and I'm glad that you feel the same. But we're going to wrap things up now. Mark, let everyone know where they can find you, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Wardy. Appreciate it. We'll definitely do this more this offseason. And you can find me at GiraffeNeckMark on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and then, of course, the YouTube channel, GiraffeNeckMark. 12 days of rankings coming up. December 14th is when we start.
Time of year, baby.
Yes, sir. So if you guys are interested in rankings, check out the YouTube channel, and let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets, baby. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back live probably around same place, same time tomorrow. Not sure if I'll have a guest on yet. We will see for Winter Meetings Day 3. I'm not really looking forward to it right now, but hopefully we have something to look forward to. So until then, have a great rest of your day, night, evening, whenever you're watching this.